Welcome to Killerton. My name is Shelley Tobin. I'm costume curator here, and I'm here today with my colleague Katarina Robinson. Killerton is a large National Trust estate. We're one of the biggest agricultural estates run by the National Trust, and at the heart of it is the mansion and a beautiful garden. There are acres and acres of glorious countryside surrounding Killerton, so visitors come to see us for that and to enjoy a day out in nature. But they also come to see our unique selling point, really, which is a large dress collection. It's the largest collection of historic fashion cared for by the National Trust. It came to the National Trust in the late 1970s, and it's been displayed in an annual exhibition ever since June 1978. The house up until that time had been occupied by the Ackland family. They had moved out by the 1940s when two schools were evacuated here during the Second World War. And then from the 1950s, 1960s, there were various organisations that used the house. Latterly, St Luke's College, which is part of the University of Exeter, who used Killerton as a hall of residence until the mid-1970s. My colleague Charlotte Eddington and I produce an annual exhibition drawn from over 20,000 objects in the collection. This is something that we do every year, and we often say we're like the perennial hamsters on the little wheel as we produce our yearly themes. Each theme is really a hook to hang the collection on, so we tend to work with the strengths of the collection, but we have actually looked at all sorts of themes which reflect things that happen in general on the National Trust estate, the history of the family, and also the sort of themes that the National Trust are currently concerned with, like, for instance, climate change. The exhibition is shown on the first floor of the house. It is essentially, to all intents and purposes, a gallery of fashion on this floor, and we have 8 spaces which are dedicated to exhibiting pieces from the collection. We'd like to tell all sorts of stories about the objects that we have in our care. So sometimes we'll be able to draw out facts about the objects themselves, who made them, where they were made. Quite often we do have stories about the people who wore this clothing as well, and we can tell their own stories in the context of the current theme. The exhibition is put together by Charlotte and myself, and we do everything from decorating and mounting to writing and researching the interpretation. The rest of the exhibition, so in terms of graphic design, for instance, is done by an external contractor. So we bring in an external graphic designer, and we also work with a textile conservator towards producing the exhibition. For this year's exhibition, we're asking visitors to use their imagination and imagine that they have been invited to spend a lovely weekend visiting the Ackland family, a country house weekend, in fact, where they arrive at the mansion to be shown upstairs to unpack, or imagine that they are unpacking, and through the exhibition and the examples of clothing that we have on show, choose what sorts of outfits they might have brought with them for their stay. In preparing each exhibition, we consider the needs of different audiences, building in layered interpretation and including elements such as interactives, film and audio.
I know it's rather heavy, Saunders, but would you be a darling and put my dress away?
Over the last few years, we've worked with both local and hyperlocal groups from our local community, including an FE college in Exeter, working with fashion and textile students who responded to the theme of our exhibition to make their own work, which was later on displayed as part of the exhibition. But we've also worked with truly hyperlocal groups, including staff and volunteers, particularly with our sustainable fashion exhibition, where we asked a group of people what was the oldest thing in their wardrobes that they still used or wore. And they were photographed wearing that particular piece of clothing and then filmed talking about it. And some of the things that they came up with, some stories that they told, were very, very moving. That element of the exhibition later toured to another National Trust property in the north of England. Last year, for a childhood exhibition, we worked with local girl guiding groups from 2 villages on the Killerton estate. They also produced work that we displayed in the exhibition in their workshops and helped to guide and shape the final exhibition. More recently, we've been working with our youth panel, which is a group of 18 to 24-year-olds who have been working on programming elements linked to the current exhibition. The youth panel is essentially a skills sharing opportunity for young people, and it also gives us a chance to gain feedback from them about what they think about our collection and the experiences that we're offering to people and what they would like to see us do here. The programming element of their work will result in an outdoor garden party and evening party in the spirit of the exhibition and the Ackland party stories. And it will include music, dancing, and there'll also be an exclusive opportunity for guests to join us in the house to experience the exhibition and to come into our cinema room. All of this is achieved from a really modest budget, and we also aim to be as sustainable as we can, reusing and recycling materials from past exhibitions wherever that's possible, and also where we can, making sure that, particularly for our graphics element, that we're using sustainable materials to produce them. The exhibition is also linked to a county-wide history festival, which is run by the Devon History Society. It's called Devon in the 1920s, and there are all sorts of events happening county-wide throughout 2025. Our part in this festival is illustrating 1920s dress, but we're also including a display about the Ackland family and how they used the house for entertaining during the 1920s, with research and interpretation written by our collections officer, Rob Meekings. As well as key pieces from Killerton's collection, we've also selected some very wonderful loans, which we've been lucky to be able to borrow from another National Trust house, Jasselton House, which is in Oxfordshire. And here you can see that we have 2 really glorious gowns, both Paris couture, made for the same person, Violet Mason, who was a socialite in the 1920s, who later went on to marry the editor of the Times. She obviously dressed very well. She came from an aristocratic family and would travel to Paris to choose her gowns and to have them made. And here we have a wonderful example of an Egyptian inspired dress, that sort of pink lilac coloured gown with the amazing beading by the House of Minochet, which was made by Worth, the House of Worth, a long-established fashion house in Paris. It's absolutely beautiful and follows the lines of ancient Egyptian style, if you can call it that, as people in the 1920s saw it. Influence from ancient Egyptian decorations, wall paintings and artifacts was nothing new. It had been around for just over 100 years, but it experienced a revival in the 1920s, mainly due to the discovery of the tomb of the boy pharaoh Tutankhamun in November 1922. And designers, couturiers, architects, interior designers, decorative artists all got on board with this new Egyptian revival. There was a huge craze for Egyptiana. 3 more loans, this time from the Royal Albert Memorial Museum in Exeter, which is just down the road from us, also helped to illustrate that fashion for Egyptomania in the early 1920s. But these are very different from the Paris couture gowns. Here we have a mother and daughter's dress made with mummy brown wool jersey decorated with brightly coloured woolen yarns. The wool embroidery depicts various familiar Egyptian motifs. Some of them maybe used a bit of artistic license, but some of them are very closely based on the cartouches and seals that would have been found by Carter and other archaeologists. And on the child's dress, though it might not seem very appropriate to us today, the cartouche actually spells out the name of Tutankhamun as well as the names of 2 of his ancestors. Just to underline how very popular anything associated with Tutankhamun was at this period, there is a moulded uranium glass necklace on display as well, also on loan from the Royal Albert Memorial Museum. And this includes beads made in the shape of scarabs and also a pendant representing the boy king himself. Next to it, we have this cinema magazine programme open at a double-page spread, advertising 2 fantastic lectures by the archaeologist himself, Howard Carter, entitled The Romance of Excavation. And in this lecture, he was detailing all the amazing discoveries that he and Carnarvon and the team had found. We have been lucky in that we've been able to work with the Bill Douglas Cinema Museum at the University of Exeter, who've lent us not only this cinema programme, but also a number of others and some examples of Picture Goer magazine as well, to help illustrate different elements of life and fashion in the 1920s. One of the great things about loans, about borrowing objects from other organisations, is working with them in deciding and selecting what objects we're going to have. And we were very lucky with Bill Douglas that we were able to work with one of their volunteers, Holly Stiles, who's a PhD student at the university. She was briefed on the sorts of things that we were looking for, and she was able to source a whole selection of material for us, which I was then able to choose from for the exhibition. It was really, really useful collaboration. The brief included, of course, Egyptomania, but also fashionable dress as it was seen in the movies, both influencing everyday fashion, but also stories behind the cinema wardrobe and how the movies were clothed in the 1920s, at a time when the wardrobe mistresses, costumiers and designers were not often credited. This all goes to add to a rich source of information and images to illustrate the story of fashion and dress in the 1920s. Welcome to our cinema room. We ask you to suspend disbelief for a little bit as you step into this room. This room helps us to tell the story of the movies in the 1920s and to also sum up the sort of fashion element. We've recreated the feel of a 1920s cinema in this space. We're able to talk about Eve's film review in this space, which was part of the British Pathé stable of short films, film reels, news, and other reviews which were shown before the main feature, and are very informative. And for us, they're now a great source of material and information, reflecting not just what was fashionable, but actually more what sort of things people were interested in and obsessed with.
So now we've heard about the fabulous exhibition upstairs, let's head on downstairs to join the party. So welcome to the music room. So the team really wanted to join up the upstairs fashion exhibition with the downstairs historic house. The idea was to join up the house in one whole experience. So upstairs is our fashion exhibition and downstairs is the historic house. So this is that 1920s house party that the team wanted to create to establish that. So we have a sort of rough timeline of a 1920s house party as you go around the ground floor, from dancing to drinking cocktails and playing games. So the idea is we wanted to move away from interpreting historic houses completely in aspic and using sort of interactivity to do that. As I think there's a conception that these houses were kind of in stasis somewhere, but these are living, breathing places, and that's what we want to display them as today. So another aspect of historic house display that's important for me is rooting any display you do within your history. So we've got these interpretation panels that our collections and house officer Rob Meekings wrote that root the 1920s within the family history. So there's lots of memories and quotes from the Ackland family, the family that lived here at Killerton, to kind of pepper the experience with our history as well. Interactivity is really the name of the game, and that's what the team were looking to do in all of the spaces. So in here, we start off by inviting our visitors to have cocktails. Now we've had our fill of cocktails, visitors can head on into the drawing room for some dancing. The team have created this interactive behind me to encourage visitors to dance to Charleston as they come into the drawing room to carry on that theme of a country house weekend. So as you can see, we've cleared the space. Historically, this was cleared by the Ackland family in the 20s and used as a ballroom, and we've done just the same thing. So in that sense, it's historically in keeping to flex the display of your spaces rather than keep them in aspic all the time. So once our visitors have finished dancing in the drawing room, they can head on into the library for the evening of their country house party, and they can play games, so dominoes, cards, that kind of thing. So in here, the team decided to create an experience as opposed to a display in that sense. Lastly, on our visitors tour, they end up in the study, which is kind of the room of art. So the team decided to put a lot of the Ackland family watercolours in here. So to finish off the country weekend house party, people can take a little art pack that we've created out into the grounds and capture Killerton. And then they can send their final pieces in to us, and they're on a evolving display in the corner here as well. So we're really lucky at Killerton. Not only have we got this gorgeous 18th century house, but we've also got this specialist costume collection. And not many National Trust properties are set up in that way to have that really specialist collection to celebrate. So for us, we're always looking for ways to integrate the kind of museum display with historic house display and find new ways to create new experiences. So one of the ways we do this is what we kind of nickname a hybrid interpretation model. So to join those two elements of museum and historic house, we kind of use a various layered approach to interpretation. So we use our volunteer room guides as verbal interpreters. We use whole programs and exhibitions of display like the one you've seen earlier. We use our written panels down here as well, and then all the layers of experience and interactives and using all of the senses that you've seen throughout this talk. So trying to create that really holistic experience, which is what we offer naturally within a historic house space. So thanks for listening, and I hope you come to Killerton soon.